Call to order the Planning and Development Committee meeting at 1 p.m. on December the 8th, 2021.
Yeah, here we are.
I said I would like to call to order the Planning and Development Committee meeting at 1 p.m. on December the 8th, 2021. Approval of the agenda. Not no. Recommendation that the Planning and Development Committee meeting agenda for December 8th, 2021 be approved as circulated.
Can I
Yes.
add something to the agenda?
Got her hand up good. I can hardly see her, so.
Yeah, I was just,
Adoption of the minutes, approval of the minutes. Recommendation that the minutes of the Planning Development Committee meeting held on November 24th, 2021 be adopted. Board, all in favor? Good to go. Development Services update, Scott.
Of the current applications and then we did put together a list of all the old applications as well. So I think this is our current applications. And then, yeah, here's all the applications we started with this year. These are ones that we've removed from the list essentially. Basically, the way the file numbers work, 20 is the year, and then the first file would be 001, and then the type of file it is. So you can see the number of files we had, building permits, sign permits, plumbing permits, they all get a number. It's all sequential. So I think we're up to 360 something right now. So that's 360 permits in the year. Yeah, if you go back to the previous slide, Steffi, then these are the ones that are open right now that we haven't closed. Maybe even got a couple more now. Since this was published.
So good. Any comments or questions?
No.
Nope.
No.
Okay. All right, thanks for that. New business. KWL figure 11 wall and pathway now for the benefit of property owners. So this is basically the overall wall as per the Kerwood-Liddell report, which is that copy available online?
It's not, I don't believe it's available online. It's a really big file. We could copy though if they like, we can't email it. It's pretty big, but we could get people a copy if.
Okay. So basically, this is the overall conceptual design for the flood mitigation for the channel. We're not sure that we can actually do this, but in the middle of that whole thing, you see that little green dot, that is supposedly going, we would like to see that be a park, but that's a big materialize. That's why there's the wall behind it as well. It's nice, but we're not to hold our breath. So then after that binder that's in front of Scott, that's the whole report to what the flood is, how far the waters will come into town, what the wall height needs to be. So then after that, I think it was about 6 or 8 months after that, there was artist renditions of various types of walls, and you have those on the.
I think so. If we go forward, Steffi. So this is what it would look like with the flood wall, like where there'd be a boat launch or like a dock coming down from the wall. And then the next two are the different types of walls. So this is what a sheet piled wall would look like with a cantilevered walkway. And then the next one is a sheet pile wall with like a glass wall on top. And then you can see the pathway would be in behind it on ground level. Another
Go ahead.
just another version we have was kind of 2 sheet piles, and then in between the 2 sheet piles would be the elevated walkway as well with a glass wall on top of that.
So at the meetings where we had presented these, I think there was public meetings too with this. concern by the upland owners was you're gonna have access to their private property. So the question was, you have a pathway. So mostly for the condo owners, they're concerned about, people just being able to walk off the pathway and walk in there. So it wasn't determined, but the key point is that all the renditions were sheet piling. So there's a rendition of sheet piling that was down here, walkway, and then for high flood, the rest of it came up here, which provided a separation from the property. The other one was the glass wall one. I'm not sure how that was going to work, but it looked good. You could watch the fish, I guess. But the wall was on the outside and the pathway was on the inside of private property. So there was no, and this one here, there's a wall behind that thing. But the issue is that to get to the elevation, most of the lots behind it are, if we go to the 351, most of the lots behind were as much as a meter, some of them slightly more than a meter. That's where their ground elevation would be. So if you were, especially for condo owners, if you were sitting in your back on the lawn area there, you'd be looking at a wall. You wouldn't be looking at so that was the concern. So this is the most preferred, but it's still sheet piling with the walkway. And most properties gave up a 3-meter right of way that developed. So White Pines, Riverside, all the new condos on Riverside here, they all gave up in their permit, they gave up a 3-meter walkway. So in Moose's, when they did the work there, they gave it up. That's why you see these short little pieces. And there's a few other properties in there that have developed, but there's the connection in the middle doesn't exist. So it's pretty hard to just go put in a piece. So through the flood mitigation was a way to do the wall for the entirety between Capel and Finlayson. South of Capel, there are too many private residences and they're not going to develop. And so you're most likely not going to see a pathway there for some time in the future. But in the community, the walkability is Capel, Riverside, the waterfront. It's just a nice loop. And so that was the initial conceptual idea of that pathway. Now, that's been talked about since White Pines, was White Pines the first, or was Riverside the first condo built in the community? White Pines. So that's like 25 or 26 years ago. So they were right at the front of giving up that walkway. And there is a mound there, and it is, but you got to get through a gate to get onto the thing. And it doesn't go anywhere because the neighboring property is private. So on both sides of it. So the logistics were this part between Capel and there, and the flood mitigation is probably the only likelihood of doing it. Mike is on the line. Who's the one that put the application in?
It was Scott Renault, and he hasn't put an application in yet, but.
No, but he talked about block wall. And so the Marina, their wall failed. I'm assuming that those other ones are at the point of failure as well. That's why you're considering doing what you're doing. And then I'm not sure what condition Mike's is in as well. But we tried to get a grant with no funding to actually build a small section. So we could actually come up with a actual cost. I have a number from a local contractor. Well, they're out of Salmon Arm, but their number was in the 2.2 to 2.5 million to seawall from Capel all the way up. Now, to start the project and have it continue. The walkway is a priority for the community. And so with the failure of the marina, the application that came to the planning committee of the lab blocks, which doesn't meet the criteria of the continuity. And that might be it at the other end of it. I thought it good that if we could just have a general conversation and find out what it is people would like to see. We got these variety of options. You also have to consider the protection of the private property of people that's not wandering off onto your property to get into boats or whatever else you might have there. So we wanted to present this and have a discussion about a possibility of different methods of funding it. So, any other comments? Comments from online?
You're having difficulty hearing, Deb, actually. I don't know. what-
Can't hear you.
She's muted right now.
Is Scott in the room there or no? Renault, sorry, Scott Renault.
Scott, did you have a
I
comment?
have a comment. My name is Scott Renault. I'm a partner in Renco Enterprises, which owns 28 or 1226 addresses there on Mount Crescent. We've had an ongoing problem. Our wall was put by our father 30 plus years ago, and he gave him a wall at the time. That was the kind of stuff that was built. It is failing. Carol's next door has the same kind of wall, but it has failed. Ours probably isn't much far behind. I've tried to patch it the best we can. So it's prudent that we do something. The unique situation with our lot is that our deeded land actually goes out to the edge of our Gabion wall. Reds and Carol's are tenured, so there's a notch. So which I know is not difficult at the end of the world, but it's going to be kind of maybe not too conducive to a nice walkway having a jut. I mean, you'd have to get that wall to be straight or get the pathway to be straight, you end up with 7 or 8 meters of our property, and then our uplands would be useless. When I first started, talking, it was Joe was the guy from the district at the time, and I'd mentioned, I was at the very first meeting here when they were talking about this flood mitigation, and I suggested that possibly, going up Young Crescent with the sidewalk and some fancy gas lights. I know Kurt Ray drove by there, and Brenda's Design's got kind of a cool shop in there. And I'm thinking that, maybe for the properties between Main Street and Finlayson, it's just not conducive to having that walkway there. When we have an opportunity, we could maybe do something, pretty hip and cool on the frontage streets that would, benefit those future businesses and development there. I mean, not everybody has to walk right along there. I'm concerned about losing a chunk of land, as we all know, that's a very valuable piece of property. And you take, 3 or 4 meters off the front of it, and then I sit down having a wall and people can't see the water. That's a significant hit to our property. So I'd like to, see what the appetite is to explore maybe developing Young Crescent, with a pretty neat looking sidewalk. And I've been to lots of communities, down in Washington that have the same kind of thing. And then I know that both residential and commercial developments happen on either side of that street. And there's a bit of a busy little hub where people can shop and do some things, and then they can make their way back on the main street in the waterfront. So that'd be my first concern. I don't oppose participating in a sheet wall. The reason we chose to go with concrete is because, as if I'm a contractor and we can do the work ourselves and have our equipment. And I could do a lot cheaper than I could do a wall. The quotes we had were closer to $280,000 for 100 feet. But I'm pretty surprised to hear how you can do, I don't know what that total distance is between Capel there, for $2 million. Price of steel is through the roof. So I'm not denying it, but it surprised me. So we would be willing to participate with the cash that we were going to put towards our development with the steel wall. We'd just like to see the walkway thought a little bit more clearly and put it up behind us.
So we just actually had a meeting today, the finance meeting, and we talked about that. So, so your idea is put a wall up there to protect your property, but don't allow the walkway to be there. And then invest a bunch of money and elevate the road at the back and clean it up, which,
So it's not just protecting our property, we're protecting everybody on there, we'd still be doing the same thing. Whether or not you elevate the road, are you gonna elevate the roads anyway? Is that part of the plan? I don't have the details of this grand scheme.
the road discussion was had, and then we talked about the idea that we're having this meeting as to what would happen to the road. One of the concerns was we have a business, the person sitting next door to you has property on both sides of the road. So if we level and raise the road so that there's no puddling done on it, we'll end up with a crowd right where she's coming across the road with her trailers and boats. So
We have property on both sides of the road as well.
yeah, so that road could cause problems unless those properties are gonna sell in the near future. If you're planning on selling them in the near future. The big thing is that as soon as you apply for a development permit, the way the rules are right now, the moment you apply for a development permit, you're gonna give up that 3 meters. So if you do anything there, that's what's gonna happen. So,
So if we don't do anything, then this whole wall doesn't go, nothing happens.
well, no, we can still do the wall, but we need your permission. Whether you do it or not, then you're not gonna concede to it. But that was the idea of why we had a cantilever over the wall, which wasn't using up any of your property. And that's why we had the idea of a step one. Basically, the second one wouldn't allow people access to your property, but the lower one, that pathway could get wet. All right, by not raising it. You have to consider that when we put the wall in, hasn't been decided yet. Needs to be at 350. The building code says you have to be above 351. Somewhere the council and the public have to make a decision on where they want the top of that wall to be. Because what's happened in the lower mainland, some of the stuff that's in this report here, I mean, we've seen 349.6, 349.7. I think it got in 48, it got above 350. Is that going to happen again? I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball, according to the environmentalists. So do we build the wall to 351 to protect the community, or do we build it to 350 and take a chance? Scott, in the planning department, the approving officer, I'm not 100% certain what those options could be or could look like. But the idea of having this conversation was seawall needs to be done, and it needs to be come back in front of Mike's property, and Capel needs to be high enough. So when we have that high water, it's not running over, going to Lukey's like it has in the past. There's photographs of. So,
For instance, would Mike at Reds,
Yeah.
he need to move his building to make that 3 meters? Would, for sure. I know where the property bins are. So his structure that he operates day to day would have to be moved. So is that what we're talking?
that's why we're here to have the conversation.
Idea of what, how, that's why I'm saying, I'm not opposed to having a wall. I think it's great. I don't even mind helping fund it. But I just don't know if it's, in my opinion, if it's the right way to maybe put that walkway, and maybe there's not the best spot for a walkway. You know what I'm saying? Okay.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement with Scott on that. I think we're all definitely in support, of course, the wall and the protection, the flood mitigation. And yeah, like with how the development of Yonge Street is going with Brenda's and possibly some other things happening with the other commercial places in there. I agree that would be a nice straight connection to our Main Street landing and our pad, and it could also help improve walkability. But yeah, I think Scott and I, and I'm sure Carol is on board with the wall. And our only concern would be that walkway, and with the Yonge Street right there, and kind of the potential of developing that, I feel that's a great option just for this short section of the wall.
Thanks for that, Mike. Scott, could you comment on like, how would you do that? How would you have all these past ones already have contributed land based on if they come in for development permit and now you're gonna come to a special zone, let's say, and say they don't have to contribute? Like what's gonna be the outfall of that from the other people?
So right now in the fish community plan, anyone who develops along the water needs to contribute to the walkway. And we do have bits and pieces here and there, and I've talked to some other people who want to develop, and they're aware of that and they're ready to contribute. And so, yeah, when we first talked, then yeah, the idea is that if you want to develop, so you're applying for development permit, you'd contribute to that walkway. And so that's the OCP, and that's what we'd require, and it'd be council's decision to issue the permit, right? I guess with this wall, there's two functions to it. One is the flood mitigation. So that's more of a, a safety, community safety issue. And the thing is, you can't build a flood wall just one property, because then it just floods everybody else more, right? And I think with the opportunity now is that if you're doing your wall and you don't build it the flood wall standard, then we've kind of lost that opportunity to even build the wall at all, because if one person doesn't participate, then really it doesn't work very well. So yeah, we'd have to look at the Red's rental property, your property, and then the property next door, right up to that first boat launch. So that's kind of like the first section. We almost have to look at that whole section all at once and come up with a plan. What's the wall going to be? What's the wall going to look like? Where's the walkway going before we move forward? I could see if we said, okay, let's make Yonge Street the flood protection, but that wouldn't really help anybody who has property in front of Yonge Street then, right? Because the water would then be coming up to Yonge Street and everything else in front would be flooded. So really, it makes the most sense to have the flood wall, on the water side, and the walkway, it's an opportunity. Right now, the OC says the walkway must go along the water. You wouldn't necessarily be giving up the real estate. It could be like a right of way, like a 3-meter right of way, and you'd have the walkway in that area where the public would be able to travel back and forth. But I mean, probably if you're looking at Yonge Street and reconstruction of Yonge Street, we'd be looking for sidewalks, or at least a wider shoulder so people can walk along Yonge Street. I do like your idea of just a little alley, taking off what Brenda does and having a little alley where people go and walk and be a little commercial section. But yeah, I think that's Councillor Malmus want to invite everybody here so we can talk about it. Number one, is it feasible? Number two, is it cost effective? Does the district Sycamore support it? Who's not here right now is Ministry of Environment, because they're going to have a big say in the wall. We've reached out to them, and I think they went out and visited your property, and they've
given us approval.
Yeah.
The last thing I'm gonna do is talk to you fellas.
Yeah.
It's and as far as contributing, we are contributing. I'm suggesting you take that 3 meters off of Yonge Street.
Right.
And we own both sides, and I can't speak for Carol, but I know she owns both sides. We know we have to give up something. I'm just saying that, and I know that there's a plan and everything, but plans can change. I mean, we gotta do what makes sense for a community. And at the moment, those properties are all very skinny, versus what's down the channel. They're really, really deep properties, so they can afford to lose the 3 meters. But when you have a small piece of property like that, you can't take the prime chunk of it. I mean, we have an opportunity we would be happy to give up on the east side of Young Crescent, a chunk of sidewalk there. It'd be fantastic. And I'm also willing, my brother and I are willing to contribute to the cost of the wall as well. What we're going to have to fork out now, that only makes sense. So I think it's a pretty significant contribution. And I don't understand why, if you have the flood wall at the channel, why we need to do anything. It's a flood wall. That's what it's supposed to do. Why do we have to change the elevation of the road? That's the part I'm missing something.
I think that's a thing. There has to be some flood. There doesn't have to be, but council would like to see some flood protection, whether it be at the channel, which makes sense, or at the road.
Ben's agreeing to flood protection. Carol is as well, but
yeah.
If I might, the purpose of this meeting was to find out the willingness, as I said to Carol when I talked to her, to participate. Right now, because of the environmental things, they're blaming the environmental, they're calling it an atmospheric storm now, not a rainstorm, I don't know, or Pineapple Express, whatever you want to term it as. But the lower mainland is, they flooded, but they flooded where there used to be a lake. Like they put dikes in and they did this, but dikes didn't hold. And so guess what? They got a water problem. We've had a water problem for 75 years, flooding. So we built a community because most communities get built by water. So the walkway issue, if it's discussed and it comes to council and council suggests that we can move the walkway to Young Street and just put a seawall at that part, then that's fine, but it's not our decision here to make. Our decision here to make is to bring something forward to council based on what we get as input from the property owners that are going to be affected by this. And by the sounds of it, Scott, you're willing to participate. I asked Carol if she was willing to participate. I never asked Mike if he was willing to participate. And does his building move? I have no idea. Can we out around it? I don't know.
I think, yeah, we have to look at my foundation because I believe my foundation is all concrete. It's poured above that 351, but we'd have to look into that. And yeah, and of course, I'm willing to participate in it as well, like with the flood wall. And I think we're all willing to put that flood wall on the channel side of our properties, or at least I am. And then I think the only concern that we're having is that the walkway being in front of it rather than just behind it. But we're happy. I know I'm happy to have the flood mitigation wall on the channel side. We'll just have to look at how that works. My property is going to be an interesting one to deal with. So that'll be a little further discussion as plans come along, of course, with the building.
So the purpose of this was to find out if there was some willing participants, because one of the things that happens is that we can apply for this flood mitigation for the seawall for a section of it, but there's always a contribution on we can get a grant to do the wall, but there's a contribution usually required. So sometimes it's 50-50, sometimes it's 60-40, sometimes it's 70-30, sometimes it's 100%. We don't know because we haven't made the application yet, but we're looking at the situation where you have a failed wall already, another one soon to fail, and we know where Mike's at, and we're looking at the opportunity to redo the boat launch at Finlayson as well. And so if we could do a small section of that wall, it would actually give us what our real costs are going to be to finish the rest of it. Okay, so if that was what this discussion was supposed to be, to find out if there was some willing participants for some contributions towards the wall, and then we can find out if we could go ahead with this. We could have the discussions that need to happen with council about how we're going to proceed and what's going to get paid for, who's going to do what. So if you're interested in doing that, maybe we could do a little work on staff side and come up with an MOU between the district and the property owners and go, okay, this is what we're going to do. But thank you if you've already got the MOE approval, because I'm not seeing where they would deny the neighboring properties.
They might have an issue with us changing the design of the wall from concrete back to metal. They were thrilled about it to start with. It was kind of an easy sell to tell them before it concrete. I prefer to have metal. It was just out of our price range.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm just here to try to make suggestions too and come up with a solution. I'm not telling you that I don't like what you're doing. If you don't chat about it, then you don't get anywhere, right? So I think that would fit the best with those properties that are so small on the waterfront side. And they're like a real opportunity. I guess that's right there.
Yeah, I would just reiterate kind of what you said. I like the idea of the flood wall just being a flood wall on the water side of your properties. Pull the traffic in at the Main Street landing area. It would be a natural flow, and then have the walkway down Crescent. And because it pulls walking traffic also away from the new boat launch. Like at some point you're gonna need to break, you're gonna need to stop it anyways, and it would be maybe a natural fit to have that walkability on down Crescent. It would add to the feel of that neighborhood, I think, where
It's
you're
already
going
getting a vibe.
anyways. Yeah, yeah, and pull people into downtown, because they're already walking around now, the washrooms are there, it's right at the end of Main Street, it's a natural feed to what everything you've got going on Main Street, and it protects the area, and it doesn't impede, because the major businesses that you guys have in that block, or what could be, I see it makes sense to stop the walking just for that little walk when we've got Youngcrest.
Gordon, go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair, I agree. And a flood wall is, we have to do it, no question. We could always add to the waterfront, a cantilevered one, let's say you amalgamated the streets and that all became one block of, if you look all the way down Riverside, they're all 400-foot lots or more. And these ones are less than that. And then also the issue with this area is that they don't have a lot of water between them and the other side of where the rail trail is. The channel really narrows there as well. So, the wall's got to go up for sure. And we just want to, get involved in some of the funding that's available. And if we can get 50% or 75% or 100%, it would be cool. And I know Scott, he has an issue. He's got a permit ready to go. And he doesn't, plus you got a foreshore renewal coming up. So
I've been working on it for 7 years.
I know.
It's a major blow if I don't get some progress. Put it that way.
yeah,
So, Brian, any comments?
No, I tend to agree with Gord. I think I think it needs to be looked at, needs to be talked about a little more. I think there's some good points on either side. I think having the walkway all the way to Finlayson would be a good thing, but there's some really good points against it. So yeah, I think it just needs, the discussion needs to go on, but it'd be good to find a way of dealing with Scott's problem sooner than later, so that if there is a way to do some work there.
So, I think that there has to be some discussion with staff. And then I'll try and get it as a late item on this council meeting today to give staff direction to actually look into. And it might be helpful, Scott, seeing as how you've got everything already in place. And I know I used to build docks and marinas, and I'm telling you, it used to take 3 months. Now it takes 3 years minimum. So, and because somebody labeled this as serious fish habitat, like zone 8 or something, a long time ago, it causes a big issue in the permit process. But the seawall, at my understanding when we did it, the seawall and flood mitigation was our best option to actually get something done that was consistent through the community. So if you're willing to participate, then maybe if we could get staff to look towards this, maybe we could have a meeting with a couple of us and staff and yourselves again once they get some information, because I know that you don't want to benefit as well. So.
Along ramps.
Well, you can see right there, the wall comes back around and that's the only way you can do it. Like that launch does not need to be pulled back, but Wetup, Martin and Capel all need to be pulled back. They're too far out. They're the ones causing the issue and backwash and silting in the rest of the channel. You need to maintain a current, a flow. So the docks do some of it, but those boat launches protruding out into the water do way more as far as causing back eddies and dropping more silt in the channel than anything else. So they all need to be pulled back to where the real property line is. and the boat launch needs to be put in at the proper 13 degrees like the one in Old Town Bay is. So that was the reason we held up on Capel, was because they have money to redo that road and they were gonna raise it. But we said, look, wait till we get, because that's the first piece of seawall we tried to get started. And that would have had a seawall on both sides. The walkway would have come up, you would walk across the top of the boat launch, but the boat launch elevation would be at 351 at the top of it. So, but it would come back. So we'd already had a chat with Rob Bushel from Three Boys, and he agreed because it's going to come back to just about where his gate is now, is where the top of the lodge would be. So if you're ready to do this, you have to do it all right, that it makes sense, because if you don't do it right to start with, then that silting issue we have in the channel is just going to continue. And it's going to get worse and worse. Like in front of the mayor of condos there, you had a little piece of dirt. Now you got a whole island there, basically. So.
Maybe, and just to go back to the question, so like the drawing on the board has like shows a boat launch and what it could look like. I've seen a drawing where it's like a solid wall that you know, during the flooding, you'd put like a solid wall in there to stop like water from coming up the boat launch and down the street. And I imagine you could, you know, in a year that, you know, you can anticipate it's going to be coming up, you could get like one of those big inflatable things, or now we're talking about like these big sandbags where you just go, you put them in where the boat launch is and stop that gap in the wall for a temporary measure as well.
So you just don't use it for a boat launch, that it's closed off, so my businesses.
Well, just during a flood. So if it's going to flood back.
It's the 8 weeks, the high water.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, if the risk to, I think if, you know, there's a risk to everybody who's, you know, on Main Street or Lukey's, I think that's the idea, is you stop the water where it's coming in.
If I might, Carol, the high water is a 3-week event, not 6 weeks. It's never been more than 3 weeks. And well, 2012 was, it was still only about 3 weeks of high water. The thing is that your particular boat launch is private. It's your boat launch. It's not the district's boat launch. We intend on tearing ours up and raising the top elevation of them to 351. So we won't have to do that. But we do have the stuff in place to do exactly what Scott said. It was a conversation that we had where we could put barricades across that boat launch that would do it. But if you raised your boat launch to 350, you most likely wouldn't see water in there again. But I don't know what the top elevation of your boat launch is. I have no idea. So I know from the pictures that I've seen and that original picture that was up there, is there a one that's got water on it in that report? No, that one, no, because it doesn't show any water there. There's one of those that actually had where the water comes in and where it would go to in the book. And you're welcome to have a look at that book, because like that's a $300,000 study. Tell us what's going to happen. And it's important that we do the seawall and we start someplace. And if you're going to do the repair, like Moose Mulligan's the same thing. Their wall is collapsed. They've rebuilt it. It's collapsing again. They're willing to participate. So, but the problem is that you got the property next door. We run into a tree, right? That's the end of it, because that's where Blue Water is. And so unless we could convince Blue Water, Eric and his brother to give up their piece, continue, then we get to wet up. Because it's the only way we're going to be able to do this is in those chunks. We got to work between boat launches to get.
Sounds like we've got a pretty good start. We've got 3 people that are willing to do a method. Might be worth, bend a little bit to make it happen.
Yeah, and there are other property owners that haven't developed yet, which are willing to contribute as well. So we already have the ones that have contributed. So but we're looking for a source of some basic funding insurance that we could actually make an application for a grant to actually build the seawall to make this document actually worth something, because other than that, it was pretty much a waste of money if we don't actually enact on it. So, and with all the flooding that's happened, I'm pretty sure the government's standing there right now with, you come to, this is almost shelf ready. We don't have much work left to do to prove this out. So, and that's one of the things that they look for, especially after this, they're gonna, well, who's already ready to go? So if you're willing to participate, then I think we got a good shot at doing something. I just have to have council direct staff to.
Absolutely.
Well, you know what? We're here to help.
And Jeff, Moose Mulligan's, of course, we all know their wall failed as well. It's down in Blue Waters, wants to do something as well right away. So I mean, it just carries on, you know.
Yeah, so I'd like to thank you because that willingness helps us move the ball forward with everybody along there. And it gets one of the community objectives moved forward as well. So thank you very much. Is there any more discussion on this?
I'll post this on our website maybe, and then everybody can access it as a PDF right off the website. So, yeah.
That'd be great. Thank you. All right, well, thank you very much. Mike, you're awful quiet. You got nothing else to say? Are you into my margaritas already?
He's muted.
He's in the margaritas.
I am not in the margaritas yet, and if I was, it'd be a Mai Tai.
Okay.
But no, I know my property is going to be an issue, but it'll be mostly dealing with the Ministry of Environment, of course, because I talked to Scott about it too when he was in the process of building that wall, as in your drawings, in front of my deck, and then wrap it around my deck. But that is a foreshore part of my property where Scott has his all the way out to the end. So that'll be something that would be ideal, of course, to do for the whole project, but it might be a bit of a battle to try and get from off of foreshore to land, or allow us to use that to build that protection on mine.
Well, and there is another issue at the corner of Scott's property. It shows as a right angle coming off of your property, but then, well, no, I'm talking on the Carroll side, but then the property line goes way back in, but there's dirt there. And there's a wall. So like when you start this application process, some people might ask some questions, but it's existing already. So, and you're right, we don't want to have it. If we had a walkway there, it would be to the advantage to have it go, you know, zigzag. That's not
No.
So maybe but it takes a council decision to change what that OCP and our current zoning says, that walkway is on the waterfront. So that would have to be a council decision.
Yeah, and I think as the points have been brought up, it would be beneficial to have it on Yonge Street for this section, and even just as a safety issue with our new big boat launch going in, as well as Carroll's boat launch, and people going back and forth on that. I think it could be a safety as well as a development area for all the businesses that are coming in on the far side by Brenda's on Yonge Street as well. I think it just could be beneficial for the town and businesses, and kind of link a flow with Main Street as well, and the already current part of the ramp or waterfront trail down there. So just, I think, yeah, that's my opinion.
When are you back, Mike?
Middle of January, I'll be back.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank you again for your input and your willingness to work with us. And so we'll have that brought to the council hopefully later today, get it added as a late item. And just for a brief discussion to start the ball rolling, because I realize that time is of the essence. So.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for involving us. Yeah.
Thank you.
We can take off there.
Well,
Thank
if you want to leave, you can leave, or you can stick around and for some more.
Or punishment.
All right, so 5B. What did I put that on for? I'm not going anywhere. Darn. Can't hear me now. Development permit, I'm assuming? So 21-353/DBP/531 Thomsen Court. So who's leading this?
I can do this one. Since it's a development permit and development variance permit for Thomsen Court. It's 531, so it's the kind of the furthest south on Thomsen Court across from the Walmart development. And then it's just north of those rural properties there. Staff's recommending that the development variance permit, the development permit go to council for approval. OCP's general industrial, and the zoning bylaw is industrial. And then with in the OCP that there's a development permit area, so you'd consider the form and character of the buildings, and then the layout of the property. As you can see, there's the site plan. They're proposing some landscaping at the front on Thomsen Court, and then landscaping at the backside of the property, screening between this property and the proposed, or this property and the existing rural properties. And then you can see the building, what the building is going to look like. Part of if you go to the next one, we can see the development permit. So this is the site plan and the variances. So you see the screening. They'd retain that screening on the south side of the property with trees and the existing shrubs, landscaping at the front, low-laying shrubs, and then the permit right now reads xeriscaping, so that they gravel it instead of putting turf down. That came out of the last meeting where the council or the committee recommended that. And then a variance in the height of the fence, so from 1.2 meters to 2.4 meters. Is the next one the picture of the building? No, maybe go back to the building. So the building is proposed to be like gray and dark gray alternating colors, white or dark gray doors with trim, and a black awning. There's 4 bays at the front, 1 bay on the side, some man doors on the other side, and then black security fencing. We go forward to the consultation. So we did refer it out internally. So building inspector said that they're going to require a engineer. No concerns from bylaw enforcement. Engineering requires that all drainage be managed on site, and then no comments from the fire department. So they are proposing to manage all the water on site. I guess with these industrial types buildings, the requirements in the development permit area just to break up the long continuous walls, and they've tried to do that with the alternating bands of color. They're going with darker colors, so there's not as much glare on the properties next door, and then the fence will also be screened on the south side between this property and the residential properties. So staff's recommending that it go to council for consideration, and it is on the council agenda for tonight.
Comments?
No, I'm supportive of this project.
Yeah, I'm supportive, sure.
So I got a call yesterday, and basically the question was why is there a 6 meter setback? And I basically said, well, I'm pretty sure that that's what it is in the zoning bylaw. And I'm looking at our bylaws, and basically the back and the front are 6 meters and the side is 2 and 5. So 6, they're not asking for any variances for any of this setbacks.
Correct.
So, yeah, I don't know why that call was made. I just basically said, well, they asked why 6 meters, because the property beside has got just a dwelling on it.
Yeah.
I said, well, this was probably done some time ago, so this isn't something that just popped up new. So I think it was done when that whole industrial park was created, wasn't it?
The setbacks, they would have been developed probably when the zone was
Yeah.
created. And especially between, residential rural uses and an industrial use, that setback's a little bit more helpful. There's also the buffer, the required vegetative buffer. So I think there was some discussion about reducing that, but then when you reduce that, then, you'd be basically opening the man door and hitting the trees that are required to put there.
Yeah. No, good job. So I've been supportive of it as well. So if you're looking for a go ahead, Terry.
Oh, no, just to echo Scott. It's coming to council tonight and it's under 10B on the council agenda. And so I've just taken note of the committee's recommendation. And so we'll mention it tonight.
So any comments from Deb? You're awful quiet.
That's because you don't listen to me when I do speak up, but I'm all good with this. I was good last time. I'm good now.
Okay, so we're the recommendation that the Planning Development Committee recommend that the District of Sicamous authorize and issue a development permit number 21-353-DP and development variance permit number 21-353-DVP for Lot 3, Section 1, Township 22, Range 8, west of the 6th Meridian, Kamloops Division, Yale District Plan, EPP 61920, 531 Thomsen Crt for the development of storage building to vary the District of Sicamous zoning bylaw 101, Section 933 from 1.2 meters to 2.4 meters, which is the fence on the front yard for security fencing. Are we, any more comments? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, carried unanimously. Thanks. Oh, C 213-360-DVP 1221 Tootie Avenue. Scott, I guess.
So this is an application for a development variance permit. It's on Tunney Avenue, which is kind of north of the Tree Street subdivision. And then I think the next road north would be the Trans-Canada Highway or Trans-Canada Highway frontage road. You can see the drawings here for the development or the Fish Community Plan is residential, low density residential, and the zoning is R1 and 2 residential. And they're looking to build a new garage. So there's an existing garage / carport to be demolished and then construct a new garage in its place. 130 square meter attached garage. Do we have a drawing that shows what it's going to look like? So here's the drawing that shows what this is a good one. So we'll kind of go perpendicular to the alignment of the current dwelling. The setbacks right now are 5 meters with nothing less than 2 meters, and they'd like to go to 1.2 meters. So I understand would there be a door at the, sorry, Thea's here in case anybody has any questions. She's the applicant. Would there be a door at the back side as well?
On the very back?
Yeah,
No,
wouldn't be a drive-through garage? No, okay.
that I recall. No, there should be a man door on the house side of that. Yeah, you can see that on the picture.
So we did refer this out to internal agencies. So the building inspector said that if they're going to go to less than 1.5, there'd have to be like 0% unprotected openings and they'd have to fire rate that wall. No concerns from bylaw enforcement or engineering. The fire department does have concerns just with little room between the properties for firefighting. If they have to get to the back of that property, the neighbor's property, the closer you get to the property lines, more difficult it is to get people or equipment back there to fight fires. This one, this is the opportunity for the committee to make recommendations. It's likely, I think we're going to put out the advertising So we have to notify the property owners within 30 meters. So we'll put out that advertising this week. And then it'll likely come back before this committee and council in January.
Any comments or questions?
Oh, I think it's a nice little project. I did talk to Taya. She's talked to her neighbors. And basically, yeah, just adding on to the carport that's there on either side. And yeah, no, I think it's a good little project.
Yeah, through the chair, I'm in favor as well. It's, yeah, looks good. And the non-combustible material is mostly in the soffits, so it's not.
Look at
it.
You've got the thumbs up from Deb as well.
Is it all good?
Yeah. So on that property, are you putting it where the trucks and trailers are? Or are you putting it on the side of the house, the
I
street side house?
think this drawing's like a mirror image. If you look at the front of the house, because it's actually going on the right side. If you go back to the photo, yeah.
Right where that carport is now.
Right there.
So where the existing driveway is coming in there, the carport, that's. So are you talking on what's the street in front of you there? Is that Pine or, because you're off Toonie, so what's the other street in front of you? Because you're on a corner lot.
Go back a couple.
You're on a corner lot.
No.
No.
If you go down like Whitehead, it's right at the end of Whitehead.
Okay, so this map I have must suck because I got you on the corner of an intersection, Toonie and something else, and it appears that you're gonna build it on the street side. So that's why I'm confused about exactly where this is going, because that's can't be right.
No,
No,
it's on the other side from that arrow.
the other
The
side.
other side of the street, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Might be operator related. But
Yeah, no, mine shows the arrow in the wrong spot as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I sent a message out about that before, that it was in the wrong spot.
Okay, so now the arrow is actually pointed across the street to the square box. When you look at the end of an arrow, you're going, this has got to be the property. And I'm going, well, this doesn't even look remotely close. So, okay, so now it makes sense to me what you're trying to do. And you have spoke to the neighbors, so and they're all good.
When are they planning on building it? Planning on building this spring?
Okay, so any other comments on this? No. So go back to are you asking us for a recommendation?
No, we'll send out the advertisement to the neighbors, and then we can bring it back to this committee in January, and that's when council would consider it in January.
Okay, no, that's fine. All right, thank you. If there's no other comments, so District of Sycamore zoning bylaw 1000 and 2021. Bylaw 1000 schedules A, D through verses 2021, 1118. So this is the yellow highlighted is the last revision that you made to this document and the campus processing.
Yeah, so I believe the red would be new, yellow is
Amended.
still working on essentially.
Okay,
But yeah, we've made a table showing the revisions we've made. Willing to talk to whatever the committee has concerns with. We are looking possibly next week to have a workshop with council to just show council what we've been up to. We have an appointment with Ministry of Transportation, or they've invited us to a meeting to talk to Ministry of Transportation. They're the last referral agency that we're waiting to hear back from. And then hopefully we can bring it back to the committee in January and hopefully bring it to council for a public hearing in January as well, so.
So did I actually hear you correctly? You're thinking about next week having a council meeting to review this?
That's right. A workshop, not a council meeting.
A workshop?
No decisions can be made. We can educate you, but no decisions can be made, so.
You want to have it on the 23rd of December. How do you like that?
I'm going, why don't we just, 25th? Wow, I thought we were done after today till sometime in 2024.
Well, it's up to council. So I'm just putting the idea out there.
Get her moving.
Okay, well, it's been a long time coming and I don't know that, it's not gonna get done in 2021. So, I guess council will make the decision. Does anybody have any comments on either of these two items? Deb?
I sent some notes into Sarah just before the meeting or at the start of the meeting. But I guess one of the areas that I'm still struggling a bit with, Riverside Avenue, but the other one is the vehicle service and repair that's including in a shopping center in the town center. I don't know if the issue becomes our definition of shopping center, or like, I'm just thinking about if Ron suddenly puts in a muffler shop in the north east corner of his parking lot, right? I don't know. Like, I know that we've taken out the fuel pump issue, but it still seems like that allows for a use which we don't really want in the town center.
I would agree with you. I'm hopeful that automotive related in the town center is on. Like,
Yeah,
if you want to have a bicycle repair shop, or you want to have that sort of a venue, I think that we would be in favor of that. But to have a garage on Main Street, that's like saying, okay, Jacobson Ford, why don't you bring your truck department over here? We'll find a spot for you on Main Street. You can sell trucks and fix them and wash them and do all that other stuff. So unfortunately, we have a pretty blank Main Street, but we're going to put some additions on it, which are going to soon fill it up. And we don't have a lot of Main Street.
yeah. Anyway, that it's buried in the shopping center definition, or what's included in a shopping center, so you don't actually see it as a standalone in the town center. And obviously Ron has a shopping center strip mall there, so I don't know if we need two different types of shopping centers, one where vehicle servicing is allowed and one where it isn't. The other issue I've brought up before is the idea of dwelling units on Riverside Avenue. I'm just concerned, like the OCP specifically talked about it being a transition area from residential to commercial town center and that. And Sarah missed, and so I'm sure she'll fix it, that she added an employee dwelling unit. But they specifically said that the dwelling unit had to be part of the commercial building. So that would be something like what Papa's did. And I just think that we're setting ourselves up for having a lot of non-conforming stuff on Riverside by not including a dwelling unit, a standalone dwelling unit, as part of the approved use on that road.
Discussion?
Scott was about to say something.
I was just gonna ask, what zone is it that you think it was missed?
C3.
C3?
Initially, we didn't even have a dwelling unit. And so she did add the employee dwelling unit, but then it's not in the C3 zone now, but it was in a previous document she gave me. So I think it got overlooked, but it's just, they specified that the employee dwelling unit has to be part of the commercial building. And we've got a lot of dwelling units on that road that are basically, if you use mine as an example, and so I don't think I'm being biased. I'm just trying to represent this in the way that street currently is. And you've got a lot of those deep lots with a lot of storage and things in the back and commercial activities with a house sitting in the front. There's just quite a few of those sorts of situations. So either it's non-conforming because it's got a dwelling unit the way the new one is, or it's non-conforming because it's got commercial activities in behind it the way the old zone was. So it's a it's actually called a transition zone in the OCP. It should transition, but I don't know what the issues are. Like, I'm not an expert on, what happens when you start to mix those things up.
So are you concerned, so I guess what would you like to see and what would you like to see not become non-conforming?
Just have a dwelling unit that doesn't have to be part of a commercial building.
Okay.
Because we've got a lot of that. We've got both, but I don't know why we're specifying it has to be part of the commercial building in order for it to be conforming.
But also, doesn't that, like if they're existing and it's a single house that's got storage space behind it, it's an existing dwelling. So until they actually come in and do something, that's when they're gonna have to conform to what it is. And I thought
I agree. I agree.
I wouldn't split your zoning up. I would leave the zoning as is, because is that correct, Scott? Anything that's existing there, we're not gonna come along and say you gotta bulldoze it down.
Right.
No. You're not getting what I'm saying. I'm not talking about splitting the zoning. I'm talking about recognizing that as an approved use within that zone. All I'm saying is add that dwelling unit to the new zone. I agree that I've got no issues. I'd have a non-conforming use that I'm approved for until I go to change it. But I just don't see why we wouldn't have a dwelling unit in that zone, which is considered a transitional zone under the OCP. Yeah, if you look, see, that's the one that is online, Scott, and it shows retail store as an accessory use. And the one that Sarah had sent me, she had included the employee dwelling unit right beside that, and it's disappeared. And if you scroll down, you'll see that the employee dwelling unit is referred to as it has to be part of the, their E, that it should be provided. Oh, it says should, so maybe it says, or no, shall be provided within a commercial building.
Yeah, I can look into that, and one reason it could have come out is because multi-unit dwelling is an approved use. And I think right now you're directed to build like commercial on the bottom floor and then residential above the commercial. So if multi-unit dwellings are improved use, like, is it really important that that be employees only, or could it be anybody? And if it's anybody, you could put employees in there. That could be one reason it came out. But yeah, definitely it's a good pickup on your part, and we'll follow up on it.
That's it for me.
I'm just gonna bring up the bad habit again. How far along are we on the Airbnb?
So the Airbnb, we basically, like, you're allowed an Airbnb in certain zones. I think the agriculture, the country residential, and then some of the multi-unit residential zones, but you're not allowed Airbnb in the R1 and 2. Sarah's trying to get a list of all the Airbnbs and contact them to engage them. We just haven't heard from anybody regarding Airbnbs. No one's come in and said, hey, I have an Airbnb. I'd like to know what you're doing with the zoning bylaw. So we're trying to engage with those people, but right now wouldn't be allowed an Airbnb in the R1 type areas, but you'd be allowed it in some of the other areas. So the larger parcels, country residential, and then in the the multifamily zones. And in places you're allowed commercial, like tourist accommodation. So it's essentially a tourist accommodation, right? So you'd be allowed to do it if you're, in some of the places you're already, I'm thinking about places that allow motel or hotel, you'd be allowed to do an Airbnb if you have a condo there.
So I would suggest that you R1, R2, and I'd even say R3 should be considered as non-Airbnb-able. And then any other areas, I thought we were coming up with an idea of a permit.
So there are the general regulations for the short-term accommodation. You'd have to get a business license, and we build those things in the business license. One of them being that a local person has to be available within an hour to address any issues. So if we get a complaint, our bylaws calling that person, he's not going knocking on the door and saying, hey, your parking isn't right, or the people are being loud. It's the person who's within an hour's drive is going and addressing those issues.
Yep.
And I thought we were also considering that they would be having to disclose their time of operation. So are they a summertime, a winter time, or a full time? And therefore their taxation rate would change to the same rate as the hotels are.
Yeah, we haven't gotten that far yet with taxation.
That was one of the biggest things
Yeah.
the hotels were complaining about is that, look, a guy's got a residential rate, he's paying 1/3 of the tax I am on a value. And he's renting it out for way more money than I'm renting it out, and he's full all the time. And he's not paying that tax rate on it. So that was one of their big concerns. And so, and we were also supposed to be consulting with neighbors. Like when you came up with that permit, they had to have all the neighbors' permission to have that Airbnb there.
So if someone in the Tree Streets wants to do an Airbnb, they'd have to apply to rezone the property. So then we'd consult with the neighbors.
Okay.
Yep.
And the other areas, so are you saying that, if there's still condos on Riverside that say Airbnb is fine, they're going to continue with it, even though some stratas have said it's not allowed? I'm not sure how heavily they police it, so.
Right, so in those cases, they'd be zoned for it and they wouldn't need to consult with neighbors.
So in our zoning bylaw, we're saying that all those condos are Airbnb-able?
I don't think that it's as broad as that, but I'd have to check to be sure. That'd be the multifamily residential. Yeah, so actually, we don't have it in the multi-unit dwellings, but it is in like the commercial zones.
So all those condos that are on the Riverside, that's got a different color red on it.
Right.
And so is that C4 tourist accommodation resort? Is that what we've classified it as?
So the red would be C4 tourist accommodation resort.
Which would basically, if it's tourist accommodation resort, would allow it then.
Right, it would allow a hotel, motel, short-term accommodation those are short-term accommodations, so, yeah.
Well, that's our biggest. Because that's what they do in the summertime is they rent all those places out. Right now, they're all empty.
Yeah, and that's probably the use that's people want and is going to continue. It doesn't really address the housing issue, but certainly those strata units are set up for that.
So if those places want to do Airbnb, they're supposed to come in and get a business license.
Right, correct.
And so who's gonna be tasked with policing that?
They would be. So they would have to have somebody with an hour's drive.
No, who's gonna be tasked with making sure that if it's an Airbnb, it's gonna be,
We could start to enforce that and let people know that if they're doing short-term accommodation, they need to get a business license. And we have had people in those types of uses ask for business licenses. Don't know if we're able to issue them. Yeah.
okay. I just want to make sure we made a commitment to the hotels when we took the MRDP tax, that we would try and level the playing field.
Right.
And so that's all I care about is we made the commitment to them to get the MRDP tax, which is benefiting us to the tune of 50 grand a year or more now. And that commitment, the condition of it is that we would create a level playing field.
Right. At the very least, you'd think they should be participating in that MRDT tax, right?
Well, they should be participating in that, but they should also, like, we had a discussion, like, if 50% of the year they're gonna have it rented out, then 50% of the year they're gonna pay that hotel tax rate,
Right.
not residential rate. So, go ahead, Gordon.
Yeah, through the chair, and Scott, maybe you could just have or Sarah or yourself just kind of refer back to Melinda kind of had just a couple pager on short-term rentals. And we talked about all those things that Jeff's bringing up. So I know when you go through our bylaw, you can go to country residential and you can see it in their short-term rental. Maybe we could just have a recap sheet. So,
Yep.
They gotta have a sign, designated sign on the house, and they gotta check with their neighbors. They gotta get a building permit, or not a building permit, a business license, all that stuff. And they gotta register with short-term rental,
Yep.
So maybe we could just do a recap sheet for, as we get closer to the end here.
Yep, for sure.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Go ahead.
I was just going to make a comment as to on stratas and condo buildings, because I live in one and I know that there's been short-term rentals, not maybe Airbnb or VRBO, whatever, however they manage it. It might be something to consider to go to their strata management company like Pacific Forum and go through the back door, because they could in essence contribute based on the units, because they know the units. And it could be the Riverside building contributes this much to the MRT tax because of this, and then they would add that to the individual's strata fees. So it would come at it as a different way. And then my other comment, just listening to the conversation, because I manage some Airbnbs and I know owners of Airbnbs, and a little bit of the conversation just sounds like you guys are guessing or stabbing at how things should be managed without actually having Airbnb owners and or managers sitting at the table for the discussions. Because it seems to be a one-sided conversation towards the hotels, and what the hotels are entitled to do the same thing. They're entitled to rent their units out under the same platforms, which is fair. But as far as a homeowner goes, it's a different experience. They're not the same thing. It's like a houseboat company. So I feel like I don't know, do you tax the houseboat companies? Are they taxed on short-term rental based on each stay? Because that would in essence be what you're doing to the homeowners. So I just feel like the conversation, I would rather know that you guys have actually engaged, and I'd be happy to sit in. I've often told Kelly that, that I manage them and I know owners of them, and that part of the conversation needs to be, or they need to have a seat at the table, because I feel like it's like Jeff saying, well, maybe this or maybe that, because you don't know, you don't manage one, you don't understand the background of how it happens. And it's not as easy to say, oh, well, we rent it out from January 1st to March 31st, and then we rent it out again July and midway through to August. So to swap that back and forth and make that fair, I feel like maybe you can approach, I don't know, there's gotta be a different way to look at it, to get it to be fair without changing property and zoning and making them have a business license. You're not going to, I feel like right now, the conversation, the way it's out there, you're probably not gonna get a lot of people that own Airbnbs coming and talking to you because they think they're now gonna be on the hook for thousands of dollars. It seems like the hotels are owning them. So that's just, I just wanted to give you my input on how I see it and hear the conversation.
Okay, I'll let Gord go first.
We already went through the public process on short-term rentals. And Melinda went through it and I think Sarah did too. So we do have a lot of input from the short-term rental people and it was publicized in the paper and everything. We made a commitment to collect MRDT tax, and we met with all the hotel owners and the biggest thing was there's not a level playing field. You know, a lot of people on short-term rentals are paying residential taxes and making commercial money, like making money on commercial business. And we also found that out through their insurance. You know, they're just a residential home, but they're renting it out. There's just all kinds of that stuff that we went through on the public hearing or the public process. So, you know, we can go back to that again, but we have to get the short-term, we're missing the boat on short-term rentals. And we have a lot of people that want to participate, but we're not there yet. We haven't implemented it yet. And it's gonna, I mean, it's not a good topic. A lot of communities, Kelowna, Vancouver, Whistler, Tofino, they're all going through this. And if you have a short-term rental place at the next to your property and they're renting it out on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, all year long, sometimes the neighbors next door aren't very happy because we got one at the bottom of Man Road. It's just a gong show. And it's winter and summer. So, you know, if you're a neighbor and you got to sleep beside that and get up to go to work every day. So that's why we had all the meetings. And hopefully we can make some neighbors happy and some short-term rental people happy, but we have to have a regulation for it.
And if I might, you know, you said, you know, we're talking about the hotels and a level playing field and, you know, that blah, blah. Well, a level playing field is paying the same sort of tax that the hotel's paying. So if you take a $100,000 piece of property as a residential, he's paying $1,200 a year in tax. Where that $100,000 is a hotel, he's paying $3,500 a year in tax. So where's the levelness here? So,
yeah, I feel that it's.
and so it would be up to the individual. What we're trying to establish is that if you tell us you rent it for 180 days out of the year, that's 6 months. I don't really care if it's in March to April and July to September and 2 weeks of Christmas. I could care less what time it is, but you're going to pay that same tax rate that the hotel's paying based on the valuation of your property. That makes it a level playing field. Now, there's some people that will get out of that business then. By the time it'll become too onersome, which guess what that does? It frees up some real estate in this community for people who want to live here and actually work here, rather than the absentee guy who's collected a check every 6 months of the year. That's the biggest purpose. That's why our real estate prices are gone through the roof, because we've got 300 units that got nobody in them. That doesn't make affordable housing a realistic. We could use 260 doors right now, and instead we're going to have the taxpayer pay for all that, and we're going to get grant funding to pay for that. But if we could just free up some doors, the prices of the real estate would balance out, and you'd have people that were living in it 12 months of the year, which is a better asset to our community. Somebody that doesn't live here at all and rents it out for the benefit of taking his money away. So that's my personal opinion. It's not.
That makes sense. I just think that eliminating, I guess, and I agree that they should be taxed, but I'm just saying that the policing it, it's like, I think that's where your roadblock is like, how do we get to them? You've got this good thing and whose job is it to get them and flag them and make them all comply, and if they don't comply, do they sell, do they just stop operating? Is it gonna guarantee that you get more doors? Because so many owners, they just wanna use it for, there's hundreds of those units that are just people, they come and use them whenever they want, and they don't rent them out too.
That's
You're not
fine.
gonna lose them,
That's fine.
you're not gonna lose them. And that may be the case with everybody else. It may not end up deterring people from like making them sell their place or rent them out full time, because they still want to use them. But I feel like the policing it, like at that end, that's probably your most difficult challenge is getting that way. Airbnb, I know in their platform, you can probably access that maybe easier. The RDO should be able to, I mean, those kinds of companies, they have all the listings and they know who's doing what, so is it based on a percentage? You know,
Yeah.
how many rooms each one has versus a hotel, but yeah, I think it's a big problem. I just wanted to kind of weigh in my thoughts, seeing as I'm sitting here live. I don't usually speak if I'm listening on Zoom.
Well, like Gord said, we did have extensive public consultation. We discussed it. We looked at, I think, 7 or 8 different communities and what they have. Like the business license in some communities for Airbnb is $2,500. So the idea is exactly what we're doing is there's a housing crunch and you're asking the general population to cover off that housing crunch because a few could afford to buy a place or they couldn't afford to buy a place. The only way they could afford to buy it was by renting it out. And at some time in 20 years, they're actually going to come here and live in it. But till then, they're going to rent it out. So, and the hotels actually are paying a higher. So all we're trying to do is level the playing field. I think that right now today, there's 160 or 170 Airbnbs in Sycamore. That's a lot. So go ahead.
I think the policing is gonna come from the neighbors and then, so the neighbors are gonna follow the district and the bylaw officer and then there. And then that's where it's gonna come from. I've talked to several people in R1, R2 communities that are, they're, really pissed off about the Airbnb and I think that's what's gonna happen. It's gonna be, that's how it will get policed and I think a lot of those people will be really happy that they have someone to call about it. So, but yeah.
And maybe it's worth having that employee that does that. I mean, if it's gonna drive revenue, taxation, up the tax rates.
Don't mention the word more employees, please.
What's that?
Don't mention more employees, please.
Well, then give somebody who's not doing anything another job. Another task.
What's happened is it's still being kicked around.
Yeah.
It's not finalized yet. But we did have open houses and there's been lots of discussion about it. And we have looked at lots of other communities. We're trying to be fair and equitable. We're trying to create areas where you can do it. But we also want some rules in place. And the Airbnbs now, like I know the guys across the channel there, that new house they built next to our lift station, that guy it's a permanent Airbnb and they show up on Friday night, they drink and scream and yell and play loud music till Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock when they leave. And there's nobody on either side of them that's happy about it. So the only guy that's happy is the property owner because it's a fairly pricey joint for the 3 days. So, but then on the other hand, you get people that rent an Airbnb and it's a family event and they're quiet as church mouses. They're respectful because they live in their own neighborhoods. But, it's like that's why the houseboats, nobody cares about them because they go up the lake where there is nobody. They can yell and scream and do what they want for all day, all night until they come home. So, but when you have neighbors right next door, that's just not acceptable, right? Like, I wouldn't be happy if a guy shows up in my driveway with his trailer and just drops it, starts partying. Like that's about what this is. I got a place in a neighborhood and the new guy buys it, turns it into an Airbnb. Like, that's not why I bought in that neighborhood. So these are rules that are gonna hopefully address that. If you got 6 neighbors right next door to you that say, yes, you can go ahead and have an Airbnb, then they now became just as responsible. So, Deb,
Are we done talking about Airbnb now?
yeah,
I had just a real quick point. I tried to do it at the beginning, but you didn't catch me. Wondering if there's a possibility going forward that we could talk a bit as a planning committee about Main Street revitalization. First, I want to thank Jeff for saving the arch, but I'm this morning, but I also just generally I know that there's talk about, one of the big things about the OCP and planning was Main Street revitalization, downtown revitalization. And we don't, I'd like us to just have a conversation about that on an ongoing basis as a planning committee, if possible.
I agree.
You want, maybe for the meeting in January, do you want us to just give an update on where we are with a couple different projects happening?
Absolutely, but then also add it to the agenda for the planning, just the planning committee. I've heard that maybe we're talking about revisiting the revitalization tax credit and such. It's just, these are the sorts of things I think it's important for the planning committee to know and also to provide input on.
Yeah, we can do that.
Perfect, thank you.
yeah, one of the issues, Deb, with the revitalization tax is that there's been a couple of projects that actually happened. And the revitalization tax wasn't even on their radar. Kelly had to chase them down and get them to fill out the paperwork to actually apply for it. So the revitalization tax, when that committee was created, I think it was Todd and maybe Colleen. Were you on it, Gord? Yeah. I wouldn't participate in it because I didn't agree with it, because all the developers that I talked to said that's at the back end of the project. We would be more interested in funding or something that happened that was at the front end of the project. So we had that discussion with staff, and basically we talked about DCCs, and there is the ability to take your DCCs and pay them over 3 years as opposed to paying them all up front before you start the project. So there's little things like that that benefit them far more than a revitalization tax.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm not arguing that point. I'm just like that the planning committee actually understands what tools are being used, and that we have an ongoing discussion about it and provide input to that.
Good. Brian?
Yeah, talking to a couple business owners on Main Street that about this, they saw it as a political move and not as any real help, such a small amount compared to what they had to do to work on their businesses. So, and I tend to agree with that. I think that it's minor, and it's big a real government thing to say, well, we're helping everybody else because we've got this revitalization tax, and it's too small to really do anything. So I just see some kind of smoke and mirrors. And if we could do something meaningful to, somebody's got their existing business and they want it to change the way it looks, and to add to the revitalization of the downtown core, then I think that something a little more meaningful and something with a little more needs to be talked about.
I agree. But because that would be up to our planning department to tell us what tools we have in the toolbox that can assist. Because a renovation is a different thing than a complete building.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, if we could spend a little bit of time on that, that'd be good at the next council meeting or next committee meeting. Okay. Any other comments? Is the galley only Deb? No other participants?
Well, no, there's others out there. I don't.
Does anybody else have a comment? Raise your hand. No? Okay, Brian, nothing?
Yeah, if I could, in part of this, a couple slides ago, you mentioned community recycling collection area. So I guess part of one of the zones. I didn't catch the talk about that. I actually thought about it a couple weeks ago before I realized it. It's an issue in our community. Is there any more information, or is it just a second talk?
So through the chair, so that's something that we're looking at. I think it's a new accessory use that's in some of the commercial zones. And they define it as like a roll-off bin that you put in a commercial area and then people can do the recycling there. And I think it would be added to some of the commercial zones.
Yeah, that was something on one of the last ones that if there's the ability to have a small like, satellite locations in commercial commercial properties, then it's better for the community to to be able to go there and have that. It's just something, if it's in there, then it's going to actually happen. But if it's not in there, then. But it's a good thing. We've got a lot of older people in town that walk around and have limited mobility, and that's something they need to be able to recycle. So.
Absolutely. If I could follow up with that, I was wondering, is there any consideration given to, say, delegating? It might not be possible to say delegate areas. This is where the city would like to see a recycling center. So to do that, we'd actually have to buy the property. Go through the motions. So in talking with residents and such, there's not a lot of appetite for people to say go to where currently we zone, which would be the industrial park. We're looking at a 2-year horizon before we have to make a decision on a current recycling facility. So I think this sort of things a step in the right direction to do it proactively.
And there'd be kind of two different uses. One would be kind of a bigger bulk recycling center, and the other one would be a very small kind of roll-off bin. People do their thing and then it's taken away, as opposed to a center where it actually would be, the recycling would be processed or sorted or collected and trucked out of there.
And then would that sound like a neighborhood recycling collection area be similar to what exists, being that it's mostly composed of bins and temporary sort of storage?
I think it would be, yeah, and if you go up to the landfill, you can see like one of the roll-off bins, and I think that is exactly what's there. And so right now, so we'll say with the bottle depot is a non-conforming use. The roll-off bin is kind of a further of that non-conforming use. So that's why they had to get the temporary use permit, because they don't have that existing non-conforming status. So essentially, if we allowed that in that zone, they wouldn't need to get the temporary use permit again. The bottle depot would remain a non-conforming use. The roll-off bin would be a legal accessory use, but the bottle depot wouldn't be a conforming use. So it'd be kind of weird where the accessory use would be conforming, but the main use wouldn't be.
Well, I know that we conditioned the TUP with them having a conversation with us, and that it was over in 2 years. And I suggested it to Evan the other day that maybe you want to write a letter, or maybe somebody in staff writes a letter to Mr. Ben Nostradamus and tells him, 6 months has come and gone.
Yeah, so Ben and I went down and we talked to Jason, who runs the bottle depot. And he really wasn't interested in finding a new location for his bottle depot. And he's aware that he has legal status there. Like he'd like to continue operating that. So then the CSRD said, well, if we can find someone in town to move it out of there, we're willing to do that. Otherwise, we'll just bring it up to the landfill, and that's where that roll-off recycling bin will be.
Well, but they already have that up at the landfill.
Yeah,
So,
they just would eliminate the service. CSRD would eliminate the service in town. They wouldn't provide the service. Jason's quite happy to have it there because he gets a little bit of rent money for having that bin there. He doesn't want to lose it, but at the same time, he's not gonna move his bottle depot. We talked about, yeah, you know, in the industrial park might be a more appropriate spot for it, but he's like, well, I have a building here, I have the use here, why would I ever make a change?
someday somebody will buy them out and.
Yeah.
That they won't buy it out to be a bottle depot.
Yeah.
If we get developed at that point, but at the same, I understand his thing. I guess the big thorn in everybody's side was the way the CSRD approached that.
Right.
It was in an acceptable location that the community thought was fine. It was behind the Parkview Mall.
Yeah.
And everybody thought it was fine. Nobody had an issue with it. It was the CSRD by themselves negotiated that deal. And how the district of Sycamore discovered that it was going on was he came in for a building permit. That was the first that we knew of the plan to move it from where it was to over there. Right. And our concern was the traffic and the rest of it. So, I mean, if he stays neat and tidy and he wanted to do an addition to his building, I don't know how you could actually clean that up so it didn't look like it does. And actually allow him to stay there with it, but limit the size of what he can handle there, right? So our big concern was the heavy trucks in and out. So, which they've managed to deal with. I mean, he's got the same bigger truck comes to get the bottles, so, or the cans and whatever else recycling they're doing there. So it was mostly the CSR, their approach. That was the thing that was the, go ahead, Gordon.
Yeah, I don't know if you remember, but before it was at the mall, it was actually right at the Mountain Park Motorsports, and it was an unattended recycle area. It was just a dump zone.
Yeah.
Entrance to town, it was just an eyesore.
Yeah.
So they just,
Fast enough.
if the bin was full, they just pulled up and threw the stuff out and drove away. So, yeah, that's why we moved it to where it wasn't visible. And then the next thing it moves to full again. So, yeah, it's a necessary service, but right now you can't take styrofoam or glass.
Yeah.
Because they're full up, so
No market for it.
I don't know what the reason is. Anyway, if there's no more comments, I see the boss for the next meeting showed up here, so. To adjourn. Okay, so we are adjourned the Planning and Development Committee meeting at 2:42. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for your time. Thanks for your comments.
See you later.